Hi, everybody. Going to wait until a couple more seconds until we see the participant number grow, and then we will start with the webinar today. Actually, I see the numbers growing. So let me start. I'm Ken Stern. I'm the director of the Bard Center for the Study of Hate. I am incredibly pleased and honored to have Andrew Goldberg with us today. Andrew is somebody that I've known for a number of years. I think we first met when you were doing a film on the Armenian genocide.
2005.
That's right. That's right. And he's made films about anti-Semitism, about the Jewish world. He's Emmy Award-winning, incredibly diligent filmmaker and journalist. And I'm so pleased to be able to share him with you today and his film. The film we're going to show, what I wanted to do is not to have people jump to watch a film and then come back to a discussion. I wanted to see if we could replicate as much as possible if we had Andrew come to Bard itself to show the film, screen it, and then have a discussion in real time. There's a potential issue if you're with your computer may have occasionally stuttering on this because it's an HD film where we're showing it over a Zoom platform. It's an experiment for all of us. So if that happens, it's entirely my fault, not Andrew's. His film is beautiful and the sound and everything is perfect about it. What I'll do too is I'm going to archive the discussion. I'm going to stop the recording. We're going to show the film. We're going to archive the question and answer period. And when we get to that, there's a Q&A box. I'd like you to ask your questions in the Q&A and I will field them for Andrew. But that will be archived on the Bard YouTube, the Bard Center for the Study of Hate YouTube channel and on our webinar tab on our website. Not the film itself, but we will give you information tomorrow in a follow-up email about how to get the film and buy it and share it with your friends and so forth. It's an incredible film. As Andrew knows, we've talked about it for a few years and the result of it is amazing. So what I'm going to do is Andrew's going to disappear. I'm going to disappear. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to share my screen. You're going to see the film for about an hour and 20 minutes, give or take. Then we'll go back and take your questions. So I encourage you to pay attention to the film, think about the issues it presents, how well Andrew presented them, and then we'll get into a discussion. So here's the film.
Ken?
Hi, I'm here, Andrew. I just wanted to stop the film. Thank you. And I wanted to thank everybody for watching this. I've already gotten emails from people, including one from somebody who had to leave, but said they're going to show it in their class. So that's precisely the reaction we wanted to get. Every time I see this film, Andrew, I'm just reminded of the power of it. And I just wanted to ask you one quick question, and then I encourage people to put questions in the Q&A box. But what always struck me about this is how artfully you did a deep dive into particular aspects of anti-Semitism. In France and in the UK, one could have also, if you had limitless time, also, for example, done the far right, but you didn't want to zoom into certain things. So I wanted to ask you just one question of all the things you had to sort of leave on the cutting room floor that because you didn't have a 15-hour documentary. What was the one thing that was really interesting that you didn't include? And I wanted to tag on to that. If it is the same piece that I saw or you have a different one, but I'd like you to describe that little vignette of from your filming in Poland that I thought was also very powerful.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for the nice words, and I appreciate that you've chosen to do this. I felt a little fancy when I told someone today, oh, I have a Zoom today with who? Oh, the Bard Center for the Study of Hate. It sounded very lofty. So I was very appreciative that I wasn't doing it for, you know, Bob's Diner. But and that's meaningful to me, and I'm very grateful that, you know, you've chosen to do this with me and show our film. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for watching. Okay, the part that a lot of people might think the part that I was, you know, that I left out was the far left in the United States. I didn't. That was not the part we left out. That was not the part that that we you know, thought about including and didn't include. There were two things that were interesting to us that we didn't include. One was the rise of anti-Semitism in Germany. Now, a lot of the rise of anti-Semitism in Germany is taking place from people of Muslim origin who live there, similar to what's happening in France, although a lot of those people come from different places. And also from far-right groups that are gaining political attention and just momentum in Germany. And, you know, Germany, I think, has been an example of the best behaved post-Holocaust country in Europe, for good reason, of course. That's not to say they've gotten it right. They've not to say that they've done it well, but they've certainly done it the most. You know, you've seen all sorts of actions that Germany has taken, and yet now the great mute button of post-Holocaust expression is letting those voices come to the surface again, or is unable to stop them from coming to the surface again. And I think that shows you the perniciousness of this disease. It shows you that it is virtually impossible. It's like, it isn't like playing whack-a-mole. It's more like trying to stop flowing water. It just can't be done. And if you put up a dam, it will ultimately have cracks. Poland was the other part that was interesting to us. When we, you know, Poland has a real good case of nationalism going on there. And when we were filming this, we stopped in Poland. We filmed in Poland because they had this nationalist march, which had 60,000 people in it, waving the flags of Poland. Anti-Semitism is all over the place in those marches. And then we forgot about it. And we decided we weren't going to cover Poland, and I'll cover the story you're talking about in a second. But the next year we were shooting in England, filming in England. I don't like to say shooting. And they had the same march, big nationalist march, white, Poland, Christian. And this time there were 200,000 people there. And it was led by the president. And, you know, this sends chills down your spine if you think about big, white, nationalist marches roaring through Europe. The end of these stories are always the same. Wars, genocides, violent actions, and oppression of minorities. The story that you were referring to, which is very funny, was that next to our hotel didn't have a gift shop. So we walked around the corner, and I'm sure most people have been to Europe, every city in Europe has these streets where they've closed it off, and it's just a bunch of, you know, sort of tourists walking around with their big giant cameras and you know, walking 5 abreast slowly, and you just can't wait to get around them. And there was a gift shop there, which was sort of for the hotels of the area. We went into it, and I thought, you know, I would just sort of see if they had anything Jewish in there, because they had everything Catholic stacked to the ceiling. It's a gift shop. It's not a Catholic shop. I said, do you have anything Jewish? She goes, come with me. So she brings me to the back to the store, and there are these wooden dolls, tons of them, hundreds of them, and every one of them is a Jewish person, identifiably Jewish in an extreme way. Nose, hair, outfit, like an Orthodox Jew would look, holding money. They're all holding money. And she says, you see, with the Jew, he's good with the money. Now, I couldn't believe this, because it was like there weren't 7 of them in a corner. There must have been 400 of these dolls. And they're sold all over Poland. Now, there's an argument that these aren't anti-Semitic, that they're cultural, that they're historic, that they're a form of craftsmanship. But you can't get away from the idea of the relationship between Jews and money and being put together. And a very interesting story is that we went to rent a camera when we were in Poland. We were missing a certain camera. We found a guy who rented the camera. He rented it out of his apartment. It was not a rental house. And we went to his apartment, and he had a picture in his house of a Jew with money on his wall. And I said, well, this is strange. I said, are you Jewish? He said, no, of course, defensively, no. I have this picture on my wall of a Jew with money, because if you have a Jews with money, it's good luck for you and your money. What do you make of that? That's my story.
Great. Thank you, Andy.
Sorry if I went on too long.
No. And that was quite a visual, and especially, when we're seeing things about retiring Aunt Jemima and other things. I was seeing that again and thinking, imagine there was an Aunt Jemima store, right? So that was the sort of parallel.
Exactly.
And let me get you some of the questions, some great questions here. A lot of them, we'll follow this up with the email, but I'll let you speak to it first. It's just a technical thing. People are saying the film is incredible. How do we get access to it? I'll send a follow-up email, but if you want to tell people now how they can get access.
I think it's on Amazon Prime. PBS handles that, right?
Okay.
We don't handle that. PBS has it streaming through, it's over. Actually, it ended 2 days ago. 30 days of streaming. You can stream it for a longer period of time if you're a member of a PBS station with something called, I believe, Passport. It's on Amazon Prime. It's available on DVD, also on Amazon, or from 1-800-PLAY PBS or Shop PBS. I don't know. I don't know.
We'll send out information tomorrow.
And hopefully it'll be on things like Netflix, Hulu, and all those things. I don't control that, but hopefully soon, Amazon Prime, streaming or DVD.
Great. Okay, and we'll send out some more information tomorrow. So here's a question from somebody from the UK. It said, having taken a keen interest in Labour's anti-Semitism episode in 2016 after Ken Livingston's interview, in which he was led by the interview, and having not done his homework on the subject to which he was speaking, how much are the media responsible for inflaming, stoking, or even inciting instances of anti-Semitism? Being a member of the Labour Party, I knew that none of those MPs was Jewish. Are the media helping or harming Jews?
Are the media helping or harming Jews in England?
Yeah, by how they were treating or not treating Livingston and Corbyn.
I think that the media, you have, like here you have very mixed results. I don't think that I'm familiar enough with all the nuance. If you watch American television and you read the American press and you live in it, you can catch the subtleties, you can feel it on your skin, you know what's happening. I was certainly never that familiar with England. What I can tell you is that I always felt that there wasn't enough coverage that the media could have been much harder on Corbyn and on Labour, that there have been hundreds of attempts by people like myself to get much more high profile coverage in a big way about what was going on, with Corbyn and about what still exists in that party, even though, Sir Starmer is now in charge of the Labour Party, is, taking actions to sort of root it out. There are still, thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of members with all sorts of opinions. And I never felt as if that the Jewish community who were the victims of anti-Semitism, or the greater English community who are living in a world where there's a human rights problem, which is anti-Semitism. I want to be careful not to make it a Jewish issue. I never felt that there was enough of that going on. There was a powerful documentary that was made about 8 months ago by a friend of mine named John Ware about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. But there should have been 30 of those. And, we see, for example, here in the United States, where, racism is a very big issue right now, and we're seeing films and coverage and all these things. And that collective voice I never saw in the United Kingdom, certainly in our experience there. But I would have to defer to my British experts to get into more detail.
Thank you. So let me ask you another question, and I'll put a little preface to it too. I was amazed about how quickly things moved from the time, I think you put the film to bed sort of in January. So, how the world changed, right? You had the Labour election, and then you had COVID. Let alone, Black Lives Matter and so forth. So all the things that have happened very quickly. So one question is particularly about COVID, but feel free to, to expand upon things that have happened in terms of after the film was put to bed that you think have impacted the level of anti-Semitism.
Well, certainly COVID has reduced the amount of violence everywhere. I don't remember what city it was, Houston or Miami or something like that, said it was like their first week without a murder, not an anti-Semitic murder. So we know that violent acts in general are down. I haven't seen a study about what's happening in France, where we have the most violent anti-Semitism in the world. But we have new forms of anti-Semitism around, the best phrase I've heard so far to describe COVID was that it was the Jew flu. That someone said, or there was a whole, internet circular, so to speak, going around, which was, if you get coronavirus, go to a place where there are Jews and cough. I've seen dozens people forward me. They assume that now I'm now that I'm done with the film and onto a new project, that I really want to get lots of emails about it, and somehow can do something about it. Unfortunately, I can't. But that the coronavirus is put together by the Zionists and China to control the Western powers, to control the global economy in their favor. And this is no different from every disease through history, going long before the Black Plague or Black Death in the Middle Ages, where Jews were responsible for allegedly, killing a third of Europe.
That's right. And if people are interested too, on the center's YouTube channel, there was an interview with Heidi Beirich, formerly the Southern Poverty Law Center, that look at a lot of what you're talking about and other anti-Asian things and so forth in terms of COVID. But thank you for that. So let me ask you one person has a sort of a filmmaking question, which is interesting. So it's one of the only filmmakers allowed in the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh to talk to the people involved after the shooting. What considerations did you set for the stories you hope to capture for the film?
What? Say again, please. What
considerations did you set for the stories you hope to capture for the film? I mean, you went into a place that was a crime scene and a scene of mass murder. So how did you approach going into that place and using it?
First of all, we're the only crew that was allowed at all. At one point, I thought we were one of the only crews. We were the only crew that was allowed in. There was considerable backlash after we filmed, after the film was released. There was a lot of pressure for us to reconsider how we approach the piece. I don't want to get into it too much because it's just not respectful to the people and the players who were involved. But there were those who were very supportive of us getting in and who were very excited about it. And there were those, I think, who were scared it might re-traumatize them. We tried extremely hard not to present anything that would re-traumatize anyone. I mean, we got in by just asking. And, we knew some of the people involved because we'd been covering that, and they said, come on in. We got there. It was a sort of an uncomfortable space. It was tense. That could have just been us. There are bullet holes all over the place. Not what you'd think. There's not just machine gun fire everywhere, but there are bullet holes. We didn't show those. We may have shown one, but we showed the little damage, but we didn't get into bullet holes in the film. I have at least one photograph that has some, I'll just say very uncomfortable imagery in it. We didn't show that. We just wanted to be tasteful and give people a sense of the room, which, the Jewish Burial Society, forgive my Hebrew, the Chevra Kadisha went in, and they take out, this is, Jewish, the way this is dealt with is that a group will go in and remove every single piece of tissue or blood that's left behind. Now, the guy that led this is from Israel, and he's in charge of, forgive me for getting graphic here, when a bus is blown up and there are body parts all over the streets, he and his team are the ones who clean that up. And they dig it out of walls and they dig it out of the ground. It's a horrifying job. And so they brought him in to do this in the synagogue. And there were some locals that helped him out, and they tore pieces of floor out, chunks of floor out, chunks of ceiling. And so what you see in there, when we pan across the big sanctuary, all the pews are missing and the floor is cut to pieces and it's been disposed of or buried or whatever particular piece has to do in a certain way. And then there's police tape around it. And we were told, don't walk here. This is where someone's body was. This is where someone was killed. Don't don't walk down these stairways. There was a chair blocking. Don't go in this part of the sanctuary. They told us the story about how one of the, I think there was a Torah on the right. I'm not sure how many there were, but it was not hit. The bullet hole hit the ark, but didn't hit the Torah. It hit the bima. It hit I believe it's called the Etz Chaim, which is the handle of the Torah, which means Tree of Life, which is the name of the synagogue. It hit the Etz Chaim, but it did not hit the Torah itself. So this is a very powerful sort of moment. I'm not sure if I exactly answered the question, but I certainly hope that I shed some light on the situation. I actually haven't had a chance to tell anybody what I just told you. No one has asked.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. So let me ask you a couple of more, and then we'll stop. And if people want to email me,
I got time.
Oh, you got time? Okay, so good. So one is from somebody that said they were a little bit confused about the discussion in the UK segment about the references to capitalism Is it an implication that capitalism will reduce levels of anti-Semitism? Any mentions of controlled capitalism that takes measures to reduce economic disparities? I guess the larger thing is you had a number of people talking about the level of anti-Semitism associated with Corbyn's group. Where was the view of capitalism associated with the view of Jews in that context?
Well, the relationship between Jews and capitalism, I believe, is secondary in this situation. The idea is that there are sort of two schools of thought. One school of thought is leaning toward socialism, leaning toward communism. In this worldview, resources are shared more equally, and things like the extreme rich don't happen. There's not terrible wealth disparity. There are not hoarders of money, and people are more pacifistic in their worldview. They don't get into wars, and that is this side of the left side of the coin. This is a worldview. This is not how the world actually is. The opposite side of that are people who are wealthy, who pray to money, who believe that conflict and individuality are the way the world should be seen. And so you have America, which is the most extreme version of this, where there's huge wealth disparity. It's a country that starts wars. Look at Iraq, right? Iraq is the best example. And then you have Russia or Cuba or Venezuela, where everyone is shared. We're all trying to get along, where everyone should get a sort of an equal amount of money. And that's where capitalism is. Capitalism is the enemy of equality. Capitalism is the enemy of being of us sharing in a bigger society so that we all benefit. The ideologies of communism, but not the practice of communism. The practice of communism, we know, is a disaster, because it ultimately leads to these sort of dictatorial regimes like we saw with Russia, which didn't work. But maybe there's a middle ground. So lefty, much further left than the American left, and the American right. These are these two opposing forces. So the socialists of England, the Jeremy Corbyns, that world, fiercely dislike the American perspective, this worldview of money, of power, and of war. They see the American president now as the most extreme version of that, and they see Western Europe, Westernism, right? Not Eastern, Russia being Eastern, sort of, right? That's good. America, Western Europe, money, England, bad. Conflict. Israel falls squarely on the side of America. Israel is an ally of America. Israel is Jewish. Jews are good at capitalism, supposedly. This is where Jews and capitalism fit in. Capitalism in America is number one. Jews and capitalism is number two. And so Jews become the enemy of the left. So if you're on the left, you don't like the Jews. You don't like America. You don't like the people who start wars. In their mind, America starts wars. In their mind, Israel starts wars, always against the underdog. And in their mind, Tony Blair, who used to run the Labour Party in England, also starts wars. So in their mind, the old Labour Party, they're bad too. All there is now is the new Labour Party, this extreme left thing that Jeremy Corbyn and all of his momentum and all of these followers, people won't know what momentum is, but all of these followers have. But now the recent election, this guy is less extreme, we think. I hope I explained that clearly enough.
Well, thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask 4 more questions. One is a couplet of 2, and then 2 other questions. Then I'll let you go, and really appreciate all of what you're sharing with us. So the 2 I want to combine are, one question: why does the far left and right blame Jews for the same things and opposite things? And I want to couple that with somebody who's a professor who I know says, I always emphasize that we are watching the rise of global, quote, exterminatory anti-Semitism. To emphasize that the goal of all these manifestations is genocide. I wonder why you didn't attempt to do any comparing and contrasting between these different types.
Which part of the question should I answer first?
Whichever you wish.
I mean, I think that the left, you can take all these phrases about Jews, old school phrases about Jews. Jews are good at, Jews have power, Jews seek to control the world, Jews seek to harm non-Jews, Jews killed Jesus, Jews are the enemy of, you name it, Jews are working conspiratorially behind the scenes to harm others. These are all the language of anti-Semitism that goes back centuries. you can take the description of Israel and you can pull out the word Jew and drop in the word Israel. And these are the exact same phrases that are used to describe Israel. So on the far right, they're using this language to describe the Jew. And on the far left, they're using this exact same language, the exact same imagery, internet memes, words, catchphrases, secret dog whistles, right? Dog whistles are those things that one anti-Semite can say to another and they both understand, but no one around really gets it either. An example of that is in the film is globalist, right? Let's talk about African Americans. An example of that is thug. When a political leader refers to thugs, African Americans know full well that that's a racist comment designed to insult them. So they hear it and the other racists hear it, but no one else hears it, right? So they're offended. The other people are excited about it. And so here's where where the left and the right meet. They meet sometimes in chat rooms too, never realizing they're from two sides of the political spectrum. They just collectively hate Jews in Israel and kind of play with the words in their own little way. And this is where I think the right and the left ultimately come all the way around and bump into each other. Tony Blair talks about that quite a bit. Now, in terms of anti-Semitism around the world being exterminatory, that's 2 levels past what's happening now. I can't, as a journalist, I'm not a person who makes these sort of predictions. I don't know what the intention is. I think that a lot of racists would be happy if the particular group that they don't like was gone, but whether or not they would participate in killing them all is another story. I do know I've been to Rwanda, and I know that it was very quick that people took machetes to their neighbors. You know, you can just walk down the street there and be reminded in about 35 seconds about what happened. It's a very much a living history there. For people who don't know, there was a big genocide in Rwanda. And, you know, I believe that people can very quickly turn into mass murderers in a second. In that sense, I think that anti-Semitism has the potential to always explode, erupt, and end in the worst kind of violence. Whether or not that's what's in practice right now, that's beyond the scope of my thinking. I'll leave that to smarter people like you, Ken.
It's a tough question, but you handled it very well, so thank you. Andrew, so the penultimate question is about the French segment. So one of the interviewees spoke about the difference between Muslims who have been successfully integrated into French society versus those who have not, and that the perceptions around this are skewed. Can you speak more about that?
Listen, whenever we talk about minority groups, oppressed groups, disenfranchised communities, we often talk about the problem, the bad eggs in those communities, the bad apples. There are millions of Muslims who live in France. When we say people of Muslim origin, right? It's very important because not everybody would describe themselves as a practicing Muslim or as a very observant Muslim. They might identify themselves historically as one or from a family of those who do not practice. Much like describing a Jew, I think there's some overlap. They're not the same. Everything. These are all areas of gray. I feel like I've lost the thread of the question. There are, you know, in France, this is something a lot of people don't know, is that in France, there's this idea of being French. The idea of being French is that you believe in the political basis of the country, right? Liberty, equality, and fraternity, something like that. Mm-hmm. And you embrace this idea, laïcité, which I don't quite, I will never understand because I'm not French. But the idea being that you're not of your ethnic group, you are French. When I said to our translator, whose name is Rafael Moreno or something like that, I said it's a beautiful name, I believe it's Spanish or Italian. He said to me, I have no idea, I'm French. When we went to into a neighborhood which is described as a neighborhood that, you know, consists primarily of people of North African Muslim origin, and we asked people, so are you from Tunisia or Algeria? They said, oh, I'm French. They were very quick to sort of identify as being French. I'm a French person. This is not something you see in the United States. In the United States, we celebrate our ethnicity. We, the hyphenated American, right? They don't do that. They don't say, I'm Algerian French. You are either, they choose one. And this is historically not the case. Historically, France comes from white Christians. You know, a guy said to me something like, oh, you know, we're Habsburg, we're Italian, we're Habsburg, we're Gallic, and we're, you know, Scandinavian. So we're so diverse. No, you're really not, because you come from, you know, communities that are primarily financially better off and white and Christian. So there's not a lot of room for the Muslim community. At the top of our section, we call it Islamic radicalism, but I think that's an unfair description, because a lot of these people are not radicals who commit these violent acts. They're just people who we would say they are people of Muslim origin, people from North Africa, or their parents were from North Africa, or their parents' were from Africa, or their parents' parents. Okay. The overwhelming majority are people who would say, I am French, I'm a member of society, and I want nothing to do with this anti-Semitism or this violence. But there is a uncomfortably large number of people who share these ideas about Jewish power, about Jewish conspiracy, about the belief that Jews seek to harm Muslims, that Jews seeking to harm Muslims. It's important to note that, and as Farhad points out in the film, North African Jews are very different from Syrian Jews who live on the border with Israel or Lebanon. Now, there's a collective brotherhood or familyhood of that religious groups have, which I would never attempt to diminish, but you don't have a day-to-day interaction with Israel as a major part of your life if you live in Morocco. It just is different than if you live in Lebanon, where you have children who are in the army, who are fighting Israelis on a day-to-day basis. And so there's this idea that Israel represents this global Jew. Israel is an abstraction, right? To a person in Lebanon, Israel is very real. To a person in Egypt, to a person in Jordan, to a person in Syria, Israel is a very real neighbor. To a person in Algeria, to a person from Algeria whose grandchildren live in Paris, Israel is a complete abstraction. It has no physical reality whatsoever. But you're watching these images on TV that are one-sided about what Israel's doing. They're only showing the worst of Israel. And what's the natural target? You can't hit Israel, the Jewish kid 3 blocks away who's going to the school. He represents everything that's wrong. He represents everything that's bad about your life. And there you have your anti-Semitism, and it becomes violent. But that's not the majority of people, Muslims in France. We try to say this. I talk much too long, and I'm far too long-winded about it, but I wish I could have done this in the movie. We tried.
No, I know. It was tough to get everything, but I thought you handled it very well. So let me ask you one final question, and then we'll let everybody go. It's from somebody who I know who's a screenwriter, and so he's going to turn a question that you asked back on you. He said, are you optimistic?
No, not at all. I'm terribly pessimistic. If anything, this film has made me, I already had a very low opinion of humans. Now this is distinct from journalistic. Now I'm leaving my journal. Here's my journalism hat. I'm setting it down. I've never been a big believer in that humans are, you know, I have this famous phrase that I've heard many people say to me. I believe people are all good in their hearts. I believe people are fundamentally good. They just get pushed in the wrong direction. I don't believe that. I think that people are very opportunistic, are driven by, you know, their desire to protect themselves and reproduce their DNA, and that those are their first biological drives, and they want to eat. And after that, everything is secondary, and that there's no, you know, altruism and good behavior and generosity and these types of values where we respect other people are learned behaviors, right? You know, we talk about Jewish, we talk about tzedakah, right? I believe it actually translates technically to justice, right? But the idea meaning that you give to others, you help others. This is something that Jews are taught by other Jews. It's not something we kind of have. We don't wake up like, oh, I'll go put money in the box. You know, this was never this is something that we learn. A funny story, well, funny is the wrong word. A woman that I know who had a terrible upbringing, tragic upbringing, goes to the zoo, and she sees the mother gorilla being nice, very loving to her baby gorilla. And this woman that I know collapses on the floor of the zoo and begins to cry. And a woman comes up to her and says, what's wrong? And she says, I can't believe this gorilla is being so nice to this gorilla. How come my mother was never this nice to me? And the woman says, don't you know, good mothering is a learned behavior, right? And so am I pessimistic? Only if we educate ourselves to be so. And I don't see that happening. I see the same nationalist tones for people who study this like I do, not like many of the people on this Zumar, who are professors and what have you, who know far more than I do, and who probably speak Greek and Latin. I think people are inherently tribal, and I think that we see what's happening now is very similar to what we saw before any number of wars. A great example, of course, is the Armenian genocide, a film that I made. You can almost replicate with a mirror the behavior of the people and the states and the communities in the Second World War and at any other number of these places. So I'm deeply pessimistic. In fact, now more so than ever. And I think that global leadership is probably the worst we've seen across every country that I can point to. It's just unbelievable how many terrible leaders that we have. And the few good ones that are left are about to be voted out. So here's my...
Well, it's a depressing note to end on, but I have to say, you know, part of the reason that we have the center is that the human capacity to divide people into an us and them and vilify and so forth is something that obviously is dangerous, that we know not enough about. And what we can do is try to figure out better ways to impact it, especially when we think, and I don't disagree with you, that we may be at an inflection point to where things get worse rather than to where things may get better. But I want to thank you again for your film, because I see that part of a educational tool for people to think more deeply about these things. So I want to thank you for making the film, and I want to thank you for the generosity of your time sharing it with this audience. And we'll get to everybody a email tomorrow with more information about how you can get the film. And thank you again, Andrew, and go back to your family.
I appreciate it, and thank all of you for putting up with me for the last for the last two people who are left. I'm very grateful.
We still have almost 100.
Oh,
anyway,
good.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.